I found a hidden camera in the bathroom of my rental apartment. Then I found another camera in the bedroom. I was impressed with the video on this camera. I've been renting out my apartment for a few years now. It's not a big place, just a cozy one-bedroom in the heart of the city, perfect for short stays or someone who needs a temporary home. My guests always seem to appreciate it, and I've had mostly positive experiences. This time wasn't any different, or so I thought. I'd just had a young couple staying there for a few weeks. They were in town for a work project, I think, or maybe it was a vacation. Honestly, I don't remember the specifics. They were polite, quiet, and they left the place in good shape. No weird vibes, no red flags. They seemed like the typical guests who just wanted a nice place to stay while they were in the city. When they left, I went over to the apartment to clean up and get it ready for the next guest, just like I always do. That day started off pretty normal. I got to the apartment in the late morning. I opened the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender from the air freshener welcoming me in. I had my cleaning supplies with me, a playlist of my favorite songs queued up on my phone, and I was ready to get to work. As I walked through the apartment, nothing seemed out of place. The kitchen was clean, the living room was tidy, and the bedroom looked just like I had left it. The tenants had been respectful, and that was always a relief. I started my usual routine, wiping down surfaces, vacuuming, and making sure everything was spotless. It was almost therapeutic, in a way, mindless work that gave me a sense of satisfaction when it was done. After about an hour or so of cleaning, I started to feel a bit warm. The sun was streaming in through the windows, and I had been moving around quite a bit. I decided that before I finished up, I'd take a quick shower to cool off. The idea seemed like a good one at the time. I had clothes in the closet that I kept for situations like this, and it would give me a chance to check that the water pressure and temperature were still good. I always wanted to make sure everything was perfect for the next guests. I headed into the bathroom, turning on the shower to let the water heat up. The bathroom was one of my favorite parts of the apartment, a modern space with sleek tiles, a rain showerhead, and good lighting. I stood there for a while, just enjoying the sensation. The apartment was quiet. The only sounds were the gentle hiss of the water and the occasional drip as it splashed against the tiles. But then, something caught my eye. It was subtle at first, just a small glint, like a reflection off the tiles. I didn't think much of it initially, just assumed it was water catching the light or maybe a bit of chrome from the shower fixtures. But as I moved my head, I noticed it again. It was in the same spot, just above eye level, near the corner of the shower. That's when I felt a twinge of unease. Curiosity got the better of me, and I leaned in closer, wiping away some of the steam that had collected on the glass door so I could get a better look. It was a tiny hole, barely noticeable, right there in the grout between the tiles. My first thought was that it might just be some imperfection in the tile work, something that had been there all along and I had never noticed. But then I saw it again, that little glint of light. And this time, it didn't look like an imperfection. It looked wrong. I felt my heart rate pick up a bit as I leaned even closer, squinting to get a better look. And that's when I saw it, a tiny, barely visible lens nestled within that hole. For a moment, I couldn't quite process what I was seeing. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of it. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized exactly what it was. A camera, a hidden camera, pointed directly at the shower. My first instinct was to back away, but I was frozen, my eyes locked on that tiny, malevolent lens. Who had put it there? How long had it been there? And most horrifying of all, had someone been watching me? Panic surged through me like a tidal wave, snapping me out of my stunned stupor. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet floor of the shower as I fumbled to turn off the water. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the handle to move. I grabbed a towel, wrapping it around myself in a rush, as if that thin piece of fabric could somehow protect me from the invasive, predatory gaze of that hidden camera. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my heart still racing, trying to make sense of the situation. My mind was a chaotic mess of thoughts, questions, and sheer, overwhelming fear. I kept thinking about all the times I'd been in that bathroom, the tenants who had stayed there, the guests who had trusted me with their privacy. I felt sick, violated in a way that was so deep, so personal, that it was hard to even put into words. Grabbing my phone, I started snapping pictures of the camera, my hands still trembling as I tried to document everything. I didn't know what else to do, who to call, what my next step should be. The idea of confronting the tenants crossed my mind, but I was too scared to even consider it seriously. What if they had done this? What if they were watching me right now? The thought made my skin crawl. I knew I had to get out of there, to put some distance between myself and that awful, invasive presence. I threw on the first clothes I could find, barely bothering to dry off, and bolted out of the apartment. The door slammed behind me with a loud, echoing thud that seemed to reverberate through the empty hallway. I called the police from my car, my voice shaky as I explained what I had found. They told me to stay put, that they'd send someone over right away. But even as I sat there, waiting for them to arrive, the fear didn't go away. It felt like there were eyes on me, even in the relative safety of my car. My mind kept playing tricks on me, making me jump at every little sound, every shadow that passed by. It was like the whole world had turned sinister, and I was trapped in the middle of it. When the police arrived, they were calm, professional, but I could tell they were as disturbed by the situation as I was. They escorted me back into the apartment, something I dreaded but knew was necessary, and carefully examined the camera. They told me it was a very small, very sophisticated device, the kind that wasn't easy to spot unless you were specifically looking for it. That only made me feel worse. How many people had been watched without knowing? How long had this been going on? The officers took my statement, asking me about the tenants, the last time I had been in the apartment, anything unusual I might have noticed. I told them everything I could remember, but it all felt so insignificant compared to the reality of what I had found. They said they'd take the camera for evidence, that they'd start an investigation, but they also warned me that cases like this were often hard to solve. The devices were so small, so easily concealed, and often left little trace of who had placed them. As they talked, I felt a deep, unsettling dread settle in my stomach. I could tell they were trying to be reassuring, but there was an underlying current of uncertainty in their words. They advised me to change the locks, to install security cameras, to be more vigilant. All practical advice, but none of it made me feel any safer. The idea that someone had violated my space in such a personal, invasive way made me feel sick to my core. After the police left, I sat in my car for a long time, too shaken to drive. I couldn't stop thinking about the camera, about who might have put it there and why. Every scenario that played out in my mind was worse than the last, each one more terrifying, more disturbing. Had it been the tenants? Or had it been someone else, a previous guest? Someone who had access to the apartment without my knowledge? The possibilities were endless, and each one filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. The idea that someone had been watching me, watching my tenants, invading the sanctity of what I considered a safe space, was unbearable. But as I sat there, trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered sense of security, something in me snapped. I couldn't just sit there, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. I had to do something. I had to know if there was more to this nightmare than just the one camera. I wasn't sure where the sudden surge of determination came from, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. My hands were still trembling as I gripped the steering wheel, but my resolve was hardening. I had to check the apartment again, to search every nook and cranny, to make sure there weren't any other hidden devices lurking in the shadows. I had to know, even if the truth was more horrifying than I could imagine. The first thing I did was head straight to the bathroom. I couldn't bear to be in there for more than a few seconds, but I had to check if I'd missed anything. My eyes darted around the room, scrutinizing every tile, every fixture, every tiny detail that might hide another lens. But aside from the camera the police had already taken, there was nothing else out of place. It was a small relief, but it didn't last long. I moved methodically through the apartment, starting with the living room. I checked behind picture frames, inside vents, even under the furniture. My fingers trailed along the edges of the coffee table, the TV stand, anything that might conceal a hidden camera. But each search turned up nothing, and with every dead end, the tension in my chest grew tighter. Finally, I made my way to the bedroom. The thought of finding another camera in there sent a cold shiver down my spine, but I couldn't stop now. I had to know. I started with the obvious places, the corners of the room, the edges of the bed frame, the nightstands. I was about to give up when something caught my eye. It was a small, almost imperceptible bump in the wall near the headboard, right above the bed. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat as I stared at it. It was just like the one in the bathroom, another tiny, barely noticeable hole, perfectly camouflaged against the paint. My heart dropped into my stomach as I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the spot. It was smooth, just like the tiles in the shower, and as I leaned in closer, I saw it the same telltale glint of light reflecting off a hidden lens. There was another camera. This one was aimed directly at the bed. How long had it been there? How many people had been recorded? What had those sick bastards captured on that camera? I had to know. I had to see for myself, as much as the thought sickened me. Maybe, just maybe, there was something in that recording that could lead me to the person responsible. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few pictures of the camera, then forced myself to approach it again. This time, I carefully pried it out of the wall. It wasn't easy. It had been expertly embedded in the drywall, just like the one in the bathroom. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing, and that thought made my skin crawl. But I eventually managed to pull it free, revealing a small, discreet device, barely bigger than a marble. It was connected to a tiny SD card, which I quickly removed with trembling hands. My heart was racing as I stared at the card in my palm, a sense of dread building in my chest. What was on it? What had been recorded? A part of me didn't want to know, but the larger part of me knew I couldn't walk away from this without answers. I rushed back to the living room, practically tripping over myself as I dug my laptop out of my bag. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the SD card into the reader, but after a few fumbles, I managed it. The computer made a soft ding as it recognized the card, and a window popped up on the screen, showing a series of video files, each labeled with a date and time. I hesitated for a long moment, my finger hovering over the touchpad. I didn't want to see what was on those videos. I didn't want to confront the reality of what had happened in my apartment, but I had to. I had to know the extent of the violation, had to understand what I was dealing with. Taking a deep breath, I clicked on the first file. The video player opened, and the screen filled with the grainy, black-and-white image. At first, it was hard to make out anything recognizable. The camera had been recording in night vision, casting everything in an eerie, ghostly light. But then I saw it, the unmistakable outline of the bed, the covers slightly rumpled, as if someone had recently been lying there. My stomach churned as I fast-forwarded through the footage, my eyes scanning the screen for any sign of movement. And then I saw it. Two figures entered the frame, moving toward the bed. The camera, positioned above the headboard, captured everything in stark detail: their bodies, their movements, the way they undressed each other with a casual intimacy that made my skin crawl. It was the tenants, the young couple who had just moved out. I recognized them immediately, though the night vision made their features look strange, almost inhuman. They climbed into bed, unaware of the camera's unblinking eye, and began to make love. I wanted to look away, to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. I was watching something so private, so deeply personal, and it made me feel dirty, like I was intruding on a moment I had no right to witness. But I couldn't stop. I needed to see if there was more, if there was something else hidden in this nightmare. The video continued, capturing every moment of their intimacy in cold detail. The couple was completely unaware of the camera's presence, completely unaware that someone had been watching them. I fast-forwarded through the footage, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched them finish and fall asleep in each other's arms. But the camera kept recording, even after they had drifted off. It recorded them sleeping, tangled together under the sheets, their breathing soft and rhythmic. And then, just as I was about to turn it off, something strange happened. The door to the bedroom creaked open, just slightly. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it again, a slow, deliberate movement, like someone was pushing it open from the other side. My blood ran cold as I watched the door inch open, revealing a dark figure standing in the hallway. The figure didn't move for a long time, just stood there, watching the sleeping couple from the doorway. My heart was in my throat as I stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities. Who was it? What were they doing? Why were they just standing there, watching? And then, just as slowly as it had opened, the door began to close again. The figure didn't enter the room, didn't approach the bed. They just stood there, watching, before silently retreating back into the shadows of the hallway. The door clicked shut, and the room was once again still. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind reeling. Who was that? Why had they been watching? Was it the person who had placed the cameras? Or was it someone else, someone who had access to the apartment, who had been lurking in the shadows, watching the tenants in their most vulnerable moments? I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized the implications of what I had just seen. This wasn't just about the cameras anymore, this was something much darker, much more disturbing. Someone had been in the apartment, watching, waiting, and they were still out there. My hands were trembling as I ejected the SD card, my mind racing with 100 different thoughts. I had to take this to the police. They needed to see what I had found, to understand the full scope of what had happened. But even as I thought about going to them, I felt a deep, unsettling fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. In the middle of one of these spirals of anxiety that my phone rang. The sound jarred me out of my thoughts, and I practically jumped out of my skin as I scrambled to grab it off the coffee table. My heart was still pounding as I glanced at the screen, and my breath caught in my throat when I saw the name displayed there. It was one of the former tenants, the guy from the couple in the video. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with a million different thoughts. Why was he calling me? Had he found out about the cameras? Did he know something? Or my stomach turned at the thought, was he somehow involved? But I couldn't let my fear paralyze me. I needed answers, and this might be my chance to get them. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the answer button and lifted the phone to my ear. Hello, my voice came out shakier than I'd intended, betraying the nerves that were currently wreaking havoc on my system. Hey, it's Matt. The guy's voice came through the line, sounding casual to casual, given everything that had happened. I hope I'm not bothering you, but my girlfriend and I just realized we left something important at the apartment, and we were hoping you might have found it. I felt my stomach twist into knots as a cold, sinking feeling settled in the pit of my gut. What did you leave? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear some muffled conversation between him and his girlfriend before he responded. Well, it's a bit embarrassing, but we left a couple of our cameras behind. They're really small, so I'm not surprised we missed them when we were packing up, but we were wondering if you found them when you were cleaning up after we moved out. You left cameras, I finally managed to say, my voice tight with barely suppressed emotion. Yeah, he said, and I could hear the embarrassment in his tone now. It's just, something we like to do, record ourselves sometimes. We're really careful about it, and we never leave them behind, but this time, I guess we just forgot. So, did you find them? My mind was still struggling to catch up, but I managed to nod, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I found them, I said, trying to keep my voice as neutral as possible. I just wasn't sure what they were or who they belonged to. Oh, thank God, Matt sighed in relief. We were worried we'd lost them for good. Can we come by and pick them up? Before I could answer, another thought struck me, one that sent a fresh wave of unease rippling through me. Matt, I began slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, was there anyone else with you when you were here? I mean, other than your girlfriend? There was a pause, a longer one this time, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he processed my question. Yeah, he said, his voice a little hesitant now. There was a friend of ours. He stayed with us for a few nights while we were in town. Why? My heart skipped a beat, and I had to take a moment to steady myself before asking the next question. What was his name? His name's Jake, Matt said, sounding a little confused now. Why do you ask? I felt a cold chill run down my spine as I realized the implications of what he just told me. Jake, that must have been the figure I'd seen in the video, the person who had been standing in the doorway, watching them sleep. It wasn't some random intruder, but someone they knew, someone who had stayed in the apartment with them. But why had he been there? Why had he been watching them like that? I told him that I was watching the recording because I thought I was being followed. I told him about a friend who entered their bedroom, As it turned out, the friend entered because he thought they were still awake. He saw that they were sleeping and went out. Later, the tenants took their cameras away. Now everything has fallen into place and I am calm.